If you want to get asylum in the United States, but you were in a third country, meaning a country that's not your country, not the United States, after you left your country, but before you got to the United States, then you need to watch this video because I'm going to share with you some important information about something called the firm resettlement bar, which, if it applies, could keep you from getting asylum. If we're just now meeting, I'm Brian Manning, and I'm a political asylum lawyer. My law firm, Manning Asylum Law, helps people all over the country secure their future in the United States through asylum. What's the firm resettlement bar? Well, the idea here is the United States government thinks, you know what? If someone who's seeking protection here in the United States was somewhere else on their way here after they fled their country, and they could have just stayed permanently in that country, well, they should have done that. Why should we welcome them in here and take them in here and give them protection when they could have had that already somewhere else? And they just chose not to take that option. That's the idea behind firm resettlement. So what's the actual rule? Well, the rule says that if you are physically present in a country that is not your own country after you left your country, but before coming to the United States, while you were there in that country, you had either permanent residence or an offer to get permanent residence, then you can't get asylum in the United States. You're barred by what's called the firm resettlement bar. So I said that you have to be physically present there. This is important. This rule basically says that if you are at all in a country, a third country, even for a short amount of time, possibly, that this bar could apply to you. People are surprised to learn that being in a country for even a few hours could possibly make them subject to this firm resettlement bar. So if someone has a flight connection, if they have to change airplanes, or maybe their airplane is just even on the tarmac for an hour in another country, picking up other passengers, well, that counts physical presence in a country. And so that could implicate this firm resettlement bar. So the next question is, if you're physically present in some other country, in any country or multiple countries after you leave your country, the next question is, did you have permanent residence there? And that may sound simple, but actually what counts as permanent residence can be really tricky, because what some countries call permanent residence really is not something that under US immigration laws we would consider to be permanent residence. So just because something says, like a visa that you get or a letter that says, hey, you've got permanent residence now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have permanent residence as far as the firm resettlement bar is concerned. And this is a tricky area of the law, so you should consult with an asylum lawyer if you think you might have permanent residence in a country that you passed through or were living in before you came to the United States, but you're not sure if it was permanent residence. I said earlier that another thing that can keep you from getting asylum and make this bar apply is having an offer to get permanent residence. So if another country says to you, hey, you can get this permanent residence, all you have to do is fill out this form or something like that, well, then the firm resettlement bar could apply to you if you were physically present in that country when that offer was made to you. So that's how. So that's the basics of the firm resettlement bar. If after last leaving your country, you were physically present in another country where you had permanent residence or an offer of permanent residence, then you could be barred under the firm resettlement bar. There are two exceptions to this bar. What are the two exceptions to the firm resettlement bar? Well, one is called the restrictive conditions exception. The idea here is that if a government says to you, sure, we're going to give you permanent residence, but then they put a whole bunch of conditions on that residence or on your rights in that country, then the US government will be willing to say, okay, you know what, that doesn't really count as true permanent residence, or at least we don't want to keep you from getting asylum here because what you had in that other country just really wasn't fair. So for example, things that could be restrictive conditions would be if the government that is giving you this permanent residence says, here's your permanent residence, but by the way, you have to live in this certain area. Like maybe it's kind of a refugee camp or an area like that where everyone with this status has to live. So they put conditions on your housing or where you can live, or they might not let you work. They might say, sure, you get permanent residence, but you don't have the ability to work legally here. Those are some examples of things. If there's a few of those, and in some cases, maybe even one, you might be able to make the argument that this exception to the firm resettlement bar applies so that you can still get asylum in the United States. The other exception to the firm resettlement bar is called the no significant ties exception. What does that mean? Well, if you were in this country this third country after leaving your country before getting to the United States where you had permanent residence or an offer to get it, but you didn't develop significant ties there, well, that counts as an exception and the firm resettlement bar won't keep you from getting asylum here. So what do significant ties mean? Before we talk about the actual ties that are relevant here, let me back up and say that there are a couple other conditions for you to be able to qualify for this particular exception. One of them is that you have to be in that country as a consequence of flight from persecution in your own country, which means that if you go somewhere for vacation for a few days or go to visit family for a while or something like that after you leave your country before coming to the United States, you will not qualify for this exception. You have to have been there as a consequence, as a result of the fact that you were just trying to get out of your country to get away from being persecuted or the persecution that you fear. So an example would be if someone lives near the border with another country and it's not safe for them to go to their airport to fly directly to the United States because of potential persecution. And the only thing they could do is cross the border into this third country. Let's say it's a third country where they have permanent residence. Well, that would be considered presence in the country as a consequence of flight from persecution. So that's one condition, is that you must have entered the country in question as a consequence of flight from persecution in your own country. And then another condition is that you must have been in this third country only as long as was necessary to arrange onward travel. So if you go and hang out for a few weeks, that's probably not going to be reasonable. Rather, the government in the United States wants to see that you just went there and you were just there long enough to, let's say, buy your plane ticket. Maybe you're there for 2 days. You buy your plane ticket one day, and then you're just waiting for a day for that flight to leave. And so 2 days total, and you're out of the country. That looks like you were just there because you were trying to move on and get to the United States where you knew you'd be safe. So that is another requirement, that you were only there as long as necessary to arrange onward travel. And so back to the significant ties part of the significant ties exception to the firm resettlement bar. Well, while you're in the country, if you make these connections and start to do things that look like you're developing a life there, you will not qualify for this exception. Example, let's say you've been dating someone in this country, this third country, and you get married to them. Let's say you're only there a short amount of time, like a few days, 5 days or something. But you get married while you're there to this person who's a citizen of that country and who lives there. And also you sign the papers to purchase property while you're there. You buy property and you're married. Those are pretty significant ties to the country. So you would not qualify for the no significant ties exception. All right, so that is the firm resettlement bar in a nutshell. If you're physically present in a country after having left your country and before arriving in the United States, in which you have permanent residence or an offer of permanent residence, then you'll be barred by the firm resettlement bar unless you qualify for one of the two exceptions, which are the no significant ties exception or the restrictive conditions exception. And some of this stuff gets tricky. So if you think the firm resettlement bar might apply in your case, I strongly encourage you to talk to an asylum lawyer to help you analyze it and to help you make the argument that either what you had was not permanent residence, so the firm resettlement bar doesn't apply at all, or that you qualify for one of the two exceptions to it. If you found this video helpful, then I encourage you to subscribe to the Manning Asylum Law YouTube channel so you don't miss the next video that we put out. Also on Facebook, join us in the Asylum Seekers United Facebook group, where we're sharing all kinds of information and encouraging one another in the asylum seeker community. Again, I'm Brian Manning of Manning Asylum Law. Thanks for watching, and it's my honor to serve you in your asylum journey.